The Bank of Scotland plc is a commercial and clearing bank based in Edinburgh, Scotland. With a history dating to the 17th century, it is the fifth oldest surviving bank in the United Kingdom, and is the only commercial institution created by the Parliament of Scotland to remain in existence. It was one of the first banks in Europe to print its own banknotes, and it continues to print its own sterling banknotes under legal arrangements, which allow Scottish banks to issue currency. In June 2006, the HBOS Group Reorganisation Act 2006 was passed by the Parliament of the United Kingdom, allowing the bank's structure to be simplified. As a result, the governor and company of the Bank of Scotland became Bank of Scotland plc on the 17th of September 2007. Bank of Scotland has been a subsidiary of Lloyds Banking Group since the 19th of January 2009, when HBOS was acquired by Lloyds TSB. History. Establishment. The governor and company of the Bank of Scotland was established by and Act of the Parliament of Scotland on the 17th of July 1695. The Act for erecting a bank in Scotland, opening for business in February 1696. Although established soon after the Bank of England, the Bank of Scotland was a very different institution. Where the Bank of England was established specifically to finance defence spending by the English government, the Bank of Scotland was established by the Scottish government to support Scottish business, and was prohibited from lending to the government without parliamentary approval. The Founding Act granted the bank a monopoly on public banking in Scotland for 21 years, permitted the bank's directors to raise a nominal capital of £1,200,000, Scots gave the proprietors limited liability, and in the final clause made all foreign-born proprietors naturalised Scotsmen to all intents and purposes whatsoever. John Holland, an Englishman, was one of the bank's founders. Its first chief accountant was George Watson. 18th and 19th centuries. The Bank of Scotland was suspected of Jacobite sympathies. Its first rival, the Royal Bank of Scotland, was formed by royal charter in 1727. This led to a period of great competition between the two banks as they set to drive each other out of business. Although the bank wars ended in around 1751, competition soon arose from other sources, as other Scottish banks were founded throughout the country. In response, the Bank of Scotland itself began to open branches throughout Scotland. The first branch in London opened in 1865. The bank also took the lead in establishing the security and stability of the entire Scottish banking system, which became more important after the collapse of the Ayr Bank in 1772. In the crisis following the collapse of the London House of Neil, James, Fordyce and Down, the Western Bank collapsed in 1857, and the Bank of Scotland stepped in with the other Scottish banks to ensure that all Western Bank's notes were paid. See Credit Crisis of 1772. 20th century. In the 1950s, the Bank of Scotland was involved in several mergers and acquisitions with different banks. In 1955, the bank merged with the Union Bank of Scotland. The bank also expanded into consumer credit with the purchase of Chester-based Northwest Securities. In 1971, the bank agreed to merge with the British Linen Bank, owned by Barclays Bank. The merger saw Barclays Bank acquire a 35% stake in the Bank of Scotland, a stake it retained until the 1990s. The merchant banking division of the Bank of Scotland was relaunched as British Linen Bank. In 1959, Bank of Scotland became the first bank in the UK to install a computer to process accounts centrally. At 11 a.m. on 25 January 1985, the bank introduced HBOS, an early application of remote access technology being made available to banking customers. This followed a small-scale service operated jointly with the Nottingham Building Society for 2 years but developed by Bank of Scotland. The new HBOS service enabled customers to access their accounts directly on a television screen, using the Prestel telephone network. International expansion. The arrival of North Sea oil to Scotland in the 1970s allowed the Bank of Scotland to expand into the energy sector. The bank later used this expertise in energy finance to expand internationally. The first international office opened in Houston, Texas, followed by more in the United States, Moscow and Singapore. In 1987, the bank acquired Countrywide Bank of New Zealand. The bank later expanded into the Australian market by acquiring the Perth-based Bank of Western Australia. A controversial period in the bank's history was the attempt in 1999 to enter the United States retail banking market via a joint venture with evangelist Pat Robertson. The move was met with criticism from civil rights groups in the UK due to Robertson's controversial views on homosexuality. The bank was forced to cancel the deal when Robertson described Scotland as a dark land overrun by homosexuals. HBOS. Formation of HBOS in the late 1990s. The UK financial sector market underwent a period of consolidation on a large scale. Many of the large building societies were demutualizing and becoming banks in their own right, merging with existing banks. For instance, Lloyds Bank and TSB Bank merged in 1995 to create Lloyds TSB. In 1999, the Bank of Scotland made a takeover bid for the NatWest Bank. Since the Bank of Scotland was significantly smaller than the English-based NatWest, the move was seen as an audacious and risky move. However, the Royal Bank of Scotland tabled a rival offer, and a bitter takeover battle ensued, with the Royal Bank the victor. The Bank of Scotland was now the centre of other merger opportunities. A proposal to merge with the Abbey National was explored, but later rejected. In 2001, the Bank of Scotland and the Halifax agreed a merger to form HBOS. The headquarters was to stay in Edinburgh, and both banks' brands would continue to be used. HBOS Reorganisation Act. In 2006, HBOS secured the passing of the HBOS Group Reorganisation Act 2006, a private act of Parliament that would allow the group to operate in a more simplified structure. The act allowed HBOS to make the governor and company of the Bank of Scotland a public limited company, Bank of Scotland plc, which became the principal banking subsidiary of HBOS. Halifax plc transferred its undertakings to Bank of Scotland plc, and although the brand name was retained, Halifax then began to operate under the latter company's UK banking licence. The provisions in the Act were implemented on 17 September 2007. Lloyds Banking Group. In 2008, HBOS Group agreed to be taken over by Lloyds TSB Group. Corporate structure. The bank has several brands including Halifax, Intelligent Finance, Birmingham Midshares, Bank of Scotland Corporate, Bank of Scotland Investment Services, Bank of Scotland Private Banking. List of Governors of the Bank of Scotland. John Holland 1696–1697. David Melville, 3rd Earl of Leven 1697–1728. Alexander Hume, 2nd Earl of Marchmont 1728–1740. Charles Hope, 1st Earl of Hopetoun 1740–1742. Colonel John Stratton 1742. John Hay, 4th Marquess of Tweeddale 1742–1762. Hugh Hume, 3rd Earl of Marchmont 1763–1790. Henry Dundas, 1st Viscount Melville 1790–1811. Robert Dundas, 2nd Viscount Melville 1812–1851. James Brown Ramsay, 1st Marquess of Dalhousie 1851–1860. John Campbell, 2nd Marquess of Breadalbane 1861–1862. George Hamilton Bailey, 11th Earl of Haddington 1863–1870. John Dalrymple, 10th Earl of Stair 1870–1903. Alexander Bruce, 6th Lord Balfour of Burghley 1904–1921. William Muir 1921–1924. Sidney Elphinstone, 16th Lord Elphinstone 1924–1955. Sir John Craig 1955–1957. Stephen Billsland, 1st Baron Billsland 1957–1966. Henry Hepburn Scott, 10th Lord Polwarth 1966–1972. Ronald Colville, 2nd Baron Clydesmuir 1972–1981. Sir Thomas Risk 1981–1991. Sir Bruce Patallone 1991–1998. Sir Alistair Grant 1998–1999. Sir John Shaw 1999–2001. Sir Peter Burt 2001–2003. George Michel 2003–2006. Dennis Stevenson, Baron Stevenson of Cottenham 2006–2007. Sponsorship. Bank of Scotland sponsored the Scottish Premier League from its inception in 1998 to season 2006-2007, when it declined to renew the deal in favour of investing in grassroots sport instead. Bank of Scotland also sponsors Scottish athletics.